A young predator chases its prey. The quarry is swift and agile, but so is its pursuer, matching its turns and twists. With a bite and a slash, it's all over. The predator looks up and notices it has strayed close to the forest. It must eat quickly before the creatures inside smell this kill and come to investigate. Soon it retreats from the trees and heads back out to the fern savanna. This time of chasing small herbivores will be short. As the predator grows, it will lose its agility to be replaced with the strength and ferocity necessary to take on the larger prey. The predators of the forest have been driven there because out on the savanna, everything is prey to this one predator. Welcome to this dinosaur profile on Allosaurus. While it is a staple of Jurassic artwork and documentaries, for a long time Allosaurus wasn't called Allosaurus. The story starts in 1869, when a bone came into the possession of the American geologist Ferdinand van der Veer Hayden. Locals had called bones like this petrified horse hoofs. Not hooves, hoofs. But Hayden thought it was something else. He took it to his colleague Joseph Leidy, who identified it as a tail vertebra of a dinosaur and tentatively called it Poecilopleurodon valens, a wastebucket genus of British megalosauroid with too many various spellings to list. 3 years later, he thought it deserved its own genus and called it Antrodemus, meaning chamber-bodied. Then these two came onto the scene to mess things up in the wild west of paleontology known as the Bone Wars. I do want to say for the record that both Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope were gifted anatomists and paleontologists, and they discovered a vast quantity of dinosaur and other fossils through their work. The problem is that their fervour for competition during the Bone Wars shreds their integrity and leaves decades of scientists picking up the pieces. Contrary to popular belief, these two rarely left their labs. They were wealthy and bought land and specimens, often getting other paleontologists or mercenaries, yes, mercenaries in the Wild West, to get them their fossils. Marsh coined the name Allosaurus fragilis from a group of bones in 1877. Allosaurus comes from Greek, meaning strange or different lizard, based on its then unique vertebrae, and fragilis is from Latin, referring to the fragile lightning features of the bones. Right after this, Marsh decided to halt excavations at Garden Park in Colorado, where the bones had been found, and concentrate on Wyoming. In 1878, both Marsh and Cope described Creosaurus and Apantreus respectively. As a side note, I just want you to know that Cope was very interested in amphibians, and his Apantreus was given the species name Amplexus, the copulatory position of amphibians. In 1879, Marsh described Labrosaurus, and Cope received a box of fossils from the Como Bluff area of Wyoming that he put on the back burner for later. Eventually, Marsh's team returned to Garden Park in 1883, that place that the first named Allosaurus came from 6 years earlier, and he found several partial and one almost complete Allosaurus skeletons. Also eventually, that box Cope received from Wyoming was opened. In 1903, 6 years after Cope had died. It contained the most complete Allosaurus skeleton known at the time. In 1908, the specimen was put on display based on the famous Charles Knight painting, and is one of the most viewed, illustrated and photographed Allosaurus displays. Even as Marsh and Cope were dropping names left and right trying to one-up the other, paleontologists at the time were complaining that the differences between these finds were not being properly described. So, in comes Charles W. Gilmore, who had been hired by the then United States National Museum, part of the Smithsonian Institution, to look over Marsh's collection. He looked over the entirety of the theropods and in 1920 concluded that all these different theropods were in fact the same animal, and he followed protocol calling them the first name described, Antrodemus. So that is how things were until a fossil site in Utah started pulling up huge amounts of theropod fossils in the 1960s. In an attempt to identify these fossils, they could not easily compare them to the single vertebra that was the type specimen for Antrodemus, so compared them to the more complete collection of Allosaurus bones described, and found a match. This is the Cleveland-Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry, where hundreds of bones have been found, and they are still finding more every time they look. This allowed the name Allosaurus to come back, as Antrodemus was not suited to compare all these bones to, so the name and type specimen were changed. Over the years, discoveries here have eliminated numerous species as individual variations of Allosaurus fragilis. In 1993, discovery of a 95% complete subadult Allosaurus in Wyoming, nicknamed Big Al, is also worth a mention. It had some different skull features, and with the discovery of Big Al 2 in 1996, both were used to create the new species Jimadseni, after Jim Madsen, who first found Big Al. In 1999, a few Allosaurus bones were found in Portugal and assigned to A. fragilis. Later in 2006, this partial skull and neck were described as a new species of Portuguese Allosaurus, A. europaeus. So these are the three confirmed species of Allosaurus: A. fragilis, A. Jimadseni, and A. europaeus. Based on a 2020 study, these are the recognized Allosaurus species, but that might change. Saurophaganax maximus, meaning the biggest lizard-eating ruler, was described and named in 1941, after a little trouble with the original name being the same as a living bird. It is unknown whether this is one of the closest Allosaurus relatives, or whether it should be classified as Allosaurus maximus. Also in 2010, Kenneth Carpenter, the first paleontologist to use Thagomizer, studied the Allosaurus specimens from the Cleveland-Lloyd site, and found a lot of individual differences, particularly in the horns and snout of the skull, features which are used to differentiate between different Allosaurus species, questioning whether they should be classified as such. But that is all we have at the moment. Now, the animal itself and size. The average size of Allosaurus fragilis, the best known species, is 8.5 meters long. The largest, most complete Allosaurus is estimated to have been 9.7 meters long, and is considered the standard maximum size. However, in 1976, James H. Madsen looked at various Allosaurus bones from the Cleveland-Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry, and calculated that some of these disarticulated bones would have belonged to Allosaurus measuring 12 to 13 meters long, putting it within the size range of Tyrannosaurus rex. Saurophaganax might increase this still further, as the maximum size estimate for it is 14 meters long, putting it alongside the largest carnivores to walk the planet. To best describe Allosaurus, I'm going to have to shift my format a little, and describe the context in which it lived first. Allosaurus is found in the Kimmeridgian and Titholian stages of the Upper Jurassic, about 155 to 145 million years ago. One of the reasons Allosaurus europaeus is considered a separate species is that it is found in the lower rocks, indicating that Allosaurus may have originated from Europe. The environment of the North American Morrison Formation was a wide expanse of floodplains, fern savanna, and river-lining forests of conifers and tree ferns. The Lourinhã Formation of Portugal was similar, but with more influence from the sea than from rivers. It was an archipelago between the west and east of Laurasia as the Atlantic began opening up. They were still mixing with North America, with some variation. The three biggest theropods were there: Allosaurus fragilis and Jimadseni in America, and europaeus in Portugal. Ceratosaurus, the horned theropod, and Torosaurus, a large and powerful megalosaurid. The only signs of interaction between these large predators is an Allosaurus pubic foot with teeth marks from a Ceratosaurus or Torosaurus. Some have interpreted this as predation, but as the leg would have covered this area in life, and is a strange place to attack, this is probably evidence of scavenging. America had other theropods, like Ornitholestes, Stokesosaurus, and Marchosaurus, while Portugal had the likes of Lourinhanosaurus and some small Coelurosaurs. There were many similar prey animals. Stegosaurus, Dryosaurus, and Supersaurus appear in both areas. But the other herbivores had equivalents: Camptosaurus in America and Draconyx in Portugal, early ankylosaurs, Gargoyleosaurus and Dracopelta, sauropods Brachiosaurus and Lusotitan, and Camarasaurus, and Lorenisaurus, and one of the smallest dinosaur names, Zb. The differences lay in more sauropods like Apatosaurus and Diplodocus in America, while Portugal had the stegosaurs Decentrurus and Miragaia. Allosaurus is one of the most common fossils in the Morrison Formation, particularly in the Cleveland-Lloyd dinosaur quarry, which I will talk about in more detail later. This means that Allosaurus has been extensively studied, and a lot is known about it. But I want to emphasize what this abundance means. It's difficult to tell for sure, but in the area of the Morrison Formation, Allosaurus made up between 70 and 75% of all theropods. Find a meat-eating dinosaur, and it's 3 to 1 odds that it's an Allosaurus. Torvosaurus, Ceratosaurus, all these other theropods, together they only make up 30% at most. I have said that calling Allosaurus the Lion of the Jurassic is a gross misrepresentation. This is what I am talking about. This is not the case for the Lorenia Formation, and this points to the reason of Allosaurus' dominance in America, the floodplains and fern savannas. Ceratosaurus and Torvosaurus are often found in areas that were gallery forests. They were large, but low and maneuverable. The other theropods were likely better equipped for this kind of hunting environment. The niche of the open plains and savannas was left to Allosaurus. Most of the Lorenia Formation is made up of this forest environment, explaining the relative lack of Allosaurus fossils. But how did Allosaurus dominate this environment? Well, it all starts with the egg. Portugal provides the best evidence of theropod eggs. Over 100 Lorenianosaurus eggs have been found with the bones of the embryo still inside, including teeth. This means that theropods like Allosaurus were ready to eat meat as soon as they were out of the egg. Both birds and crocodiles have a period of looking after their young when they are born, and so Allosaurus probably behaved in a similar way, the mother bringing food for their young until they were able to hunt for themselves. This is supported by crushed eggshells suspected to be from an Allosaurus, indicating the babies spent some time in the nest after hatching. Once able to hunt, they did not feed off the same prey as their parents. Young Allosaurus were not built like the adults. Their legs were longer, with more length in the shins and feet, an adaptation for speed. Normally, a long theropod with weight spread in front and behind it can't track a more compact prey animal like an ornithopod, with its weight more centered. Watch Professor David Carrier demonstrate this for a Triceratops being chased.
Watch what happens on the second or third turn. Turn to the left, turn to the right, left. The Ceratops is gone.
But a young Allosaurus could pull in its head and raise its tail, centering its mass. The bones were also circular in cross-section, meaning they could effectively endure the pressure of bending and weaving. This allowed young Allosaurus to hunt the small, agile prey, while leaving the giants to the adults, effectively occupying all carnivorous niches, all except the forests, where their speed and stiff bodies would be a disadvantage. But, if you were out in the open, whatever you were, there was an age of Allosaurus that could kill and eat you. An Allosaurus reached maturity at about 15, and then slowed its growth, appearing to stop between 22 and 28. Allosaurus was an odd contender for top predator though. A calculation of its bite force reveals it had a weak bite. To put it in perspective, a human bites with their molars with about 890 newtons of force. A Rottweiler, 1,490 newtons. A hyena, known to crush bone, 3,600 newtons. An American alligator, 9,450 newtons. An estimate for some of the largest crocodiles is 34,000 newtons, and Tyrannosaurus rex with 57,000 newtons. And I'm not including some of the Mesozoic crocodiles, which were almost double that. A 2001 study produced 2 estimates of static bite force for Allosaurus, just using the jaw muscles. One for cold-blooded and one for warm-blooded. The cold-blooded is an appalling 805 newtons, less than a human. But what about warm-blooded, which Allosaurus probably was? 2,148 newtons, less than a hyena for an animal over 9 meters long. A crocodile 2/3 its size had 16 times its bite force. What was going on? Well, Robert Bakker did some work and compared Allosaurus to later saber-toothed cats. Many of these animals had weak and loose jaw muscles, allowing them to open their mouths incredibly wide, and use the power of their neck muscles to increase the force of a strike. Allosaurus was similarly able to open its mouth to a 92-degree angle, and had incredibly strong muscles in the neck with low attachments to the skull, able to drive the skull downward. The skull was also able to withstand vertical forces of over 18,000 newtons, almost 9 times its maximum bite strength. Some have said that this might have helped it keep hold of struggling prey, but this strength increases to over 55,000 newtons when the mouth is open, almost 26 times its maximum bite strength. Allosaurus' skull seemed to have been built to withstand incredible vertical impacts with its mouth open. This has been called the hatchet technique, from the paper publishing these findings analogizing this striking method with a person wielding a large heavy hatchet. This would explain the weak bite and relatively short sharp teeth. If the teeth acted as serrations on the business end of the jaw, this would make sense. But as opposed to the crushing force of a hatchet, the research suggests that Allosaurus would have then pulled back with the power of the neck, possibly with aid from its arms and legs, in what the paper calls a slash and tear attack. Large Allosaurus were likely ambush predators, springing from cover and surprising their prey. Their eyes were faced slightly forwards, similar to modern crocodiles, another ambush predator. The claws on its hands, especially the large one on the first finger, could be used for hooking and grasping prey. The claws on the feet were not especially sharp and more like hooves than most theropods. This, though, would not have prevented Allosaurus from kicking and holding prey down while it ate, in a similar way some birds do today. But Allosaurus did not have especially long legs. In fact, their legs were shorter for their body size than tyrannosaurs. Despite this, its speed has been calculated to 19 to 34 miles per hour. This is the difference between the sprinting speed of a normal adult and Usain Bolt. Pits in the bones indicate that Allosaurus used bird-like air sacs. With air constantly passing through the lungs and its long stride, Allosaurus could maintain its speed longer than a human could. The thighs were ovular in cross-section, well suited to running in a straight line. Holding its head level, the Allosaurus would have been able to close in and attack its prey. So, Allosaurus was big and fast. But could it have hunted and killed those sauropods? There is evidence of Allosaurus teeth on sauropods, but some are dubious that a single Allosaurus could kill even a young, old, or sick sauropod. This brings up group behaviour. There is little evidence for groups of Allosaurus apart from in feeding situations. Like crocodiles, they may have gathered together, working semi-cooperatively to isolate an individual from a herd and take it down. Another possibility is a theory called flesh grazing. These sauropods were so big that a bite taken out of them wouldn't have been too debilitating. A carnivore, or a group of carnivores, could take mouthfuls out of different animals, spreading it around so no single sauropod was killed or crippled. This would allow the animal to heal and be fed on again later. Despite whether this actually occurred, Allosaurus's jaws were jointed in a way that widened the mouth as it opened, enabling it to tear off large chunks of meat in one bite. Casts of Allosaurus's brain have been made, and it seems very similar to that of a crocodile. It had a combination of developed sinuses and large areas for scent processing, but little room for evaluating those smells. So if something smelled like food, it was probably getting eaten, like this toy soaked in fish oil. The inner ear was also very crocodile-like, well developed for picking up low-frequency sounds, which brings me round to vocalization. It is unlikely that dinosaurs roared. Psychologically for us, it makes sense for carnivorous dinosaurs to roar. Lions, tigers, bears, all roar. All are also mammals. Both birds and crocodiles don't roar, and generally vocalize with their mouths closed. Crocodiles especially communicate using infrasound, which is too low for human ears to hear, but is followed by a low rumble from their chest. This is more likely for an Allosaurus sound than a roar, and is the frequency best picked up by an Allosaurus inner ear. So an Allosaurus probably sounded something like this. Many animals use infrasound to communicate over long distances, and Allosaurus may have used this ability to attract mates, as crocodiles do, or to alert neighbouring Allosaurus to a good feeding opportunity, allowing young Allosaurs to gang up on difficult prey. If gangs of Allosaurus did form, they were likely short-lived. Crocodile brains don't handle social interactions well, and there is evidence of Allosaurus tooth marks on other Allosaurus. It seems that Allosaurus bit, killed, and ate each other like crocodiles fighting over food. Despite the idea cropping up with other large carnivores, it has never been seriously suggested that Allosaurus was anything but an active predator. The bones indicate that they led active and dangerous lives. Many of the limb bones show stress fractures from repeated trauma. A study also revealed that Allosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex were the only two theropods examined that showed signs of tendon avulsions in the arms. A tendon avulsion is when the tendons attaching the muscle to the bone fray or break, normally in violent exchanges, as nerves are generally regulated to stop this from happening. A Stegosaurus neck plate has been found with an Allosaurus-shaped bite taken out of it. Being a poor part to scavenge from, this was likely the result of a fight. Allosaurus's feet also showed signs of stress, not linked to walking, implying that Allosaurus would have used teeth, hands, and feet to take down prey in ferocious attacks. It has been known for a long time that Allosaurus were susceptible to injury. Big Al and Big Al 2 show fractures on many of their bones. Here are the broken bones on Big Al 2, but others coming from the Cleveland-Lloyd dinosaur quarry also show injury. Healed ribs, fused arm bones, and a tail vertebra that had healed around a hole that perfectly fits a thagomizer, a Stegosaurus tail spike. This healing around the injury suggests that the keratin sheath around the thagomizer broke off in the Allosaurus, but that the dinosaur survived. When Marsh was misidentifying Allosaurus, he created the name Labrasaurus for a jaw that had some strange qualities. It later turned out that this was an Allosaurus jaw that had been badly broken, probably in a fight with another Allosaurus, and had healed crooked. What you may have noticed is that these injuries rarely killed the Allosaurus. Broken ribs, arms, tails, even jaws, toes bitten off, and they kept going. Another comparison with crocodiles suggests how. Crocodiles have very effective immune systems, which are particularly effective at fighting off infection. Many Allosaurus bones show signs of arthritis from their active lifestyle, but not much infection. With such a high injury rate, an infection might prove fatal, as apparently happened with Big Al, who developed an infection in the toe, which hampered him for about 6 months until he died. A quick note about appearance. Allosaurus was most likely scaly. It was a large carnosaur, which as far as we know, did not possess feathers or fluff in large sizes. Large theropod dinosaurs which did get into feathers were the Coelurosaurs, like Tyrannosaurs and Maniraptors. One of the distinctive features of Allosaurus' skull is the horns above the eyes. These were probably covered in keratin during life, and may have been brightly coloured. There are several theories about their function, ranging from providing the eyes with shade from the sun, to being used as weapons for territory, mates or food. This latter holds little water, as the horns were likely fragile, and there is no evidence of damage, which would be common if they were used this way. An interesting theory is that they were brightly coloured, and that they changed colour throughout the animal's life. This may have been a sign from young to older Allosaurus that they were not competition for large prey, and a sign from large to smaller Allosaurus to stay out of their way. Like with Komodo dragons sizing each other up before a fight, if there is a way for large carnivores to avoid violence, it's usually best for both parties. Now, the Cleveland-Lloyd dinosaur quarry. Since the first excavation in 1927, somewhere in the region of 13,000 bones have come out of this one site, a braided river course in the Late Jurassic. Individual animals discovered as of 2017 are 1 turtle, 1 crocodile, 1 Apatosaurus, 1 Barosaurus, 1 Ceratosaurus, 1 Torvosaurus, 2 Stokesaurus, 2 Marshiosaurus, 5 Camptosaurus, 5 Stegosaurus, 5 Camarasaurus, and 46 Allosaurus. As a pie chart, they look like this. Of course, the first question was, what was going on here? Numerous theories have come up. Mass death during a drought, a depositional part of a river channel, but these do not explain the vast amount of Allosaurus bones. An Allosaurus mating area has been proposed, but many of the Allosaurus were subadults and juveniles, not reproductively mature. Many people are familiar with the idea of a predator trap, like the La Brea tar pits. If this was a mud miring trap, herbivorous animals will get stuck in the mud. The cries of the animal would draw predators, which would then get stuck. Eventually, the stench of death would bring even more carnivores, all getting trapped. The ratio of predator to prey in these traps is about 3:1, almost the exact predator-prey ratio of Cleveland-Lloyd. If this is a predator trap, it opens up some interesting lines of thought. It's easy to believe that Allosaurus would be susceptible. Being a dominant predator, possessing a good sense of smell, and quick to take a bite without a second thought, this is just the kind of predator that would get stuck. Also, in more recent predator traps, pack animals are most common, because if you find a meal, you might need help fending off other predators. It is also common for packs to be made up of juveniles. I am not claiming that Allosaurus was a pack hunter, but loose hunting gangs, which also share these features, may have been common. The problem is there are some holes in this famed theory. The first is the mud. The bones are not deformed, so the layer was as thick now as it was then, and it's only 1 meter deep. That might be a problem for us, but not to an Allosaurus or sauropod like Camarasaurus. Also, the La Brea tar pits show heavy tooth marks on 50% of the bones, as predators chowed down before realizing they were trapped. In Cleveland-Lloyd, feeding evidence can only be found on 4% of bones. The bones in these deposits are very often broken by other animals struggling to free themselves. Only 30% of Cleveland-Lloyd bones show evidence of crushing, and no other types of pit-like wearing. A recent study carried out the first micropaleontological and geochemical study on the deposit, and discovered that the bones were likely brought from elsewhere by flash flooding. This brings up new questions. It is possible that these animals died in a more expansive seasonal predator trap and were collected in the quarry site, but the Dinosaur Quarry still has its mysteries to be solved. Allosaurus was one of the most dominant predators the world has ever known. With its speed, size, and general ferocity, it made prey of everything it came across. Other predators made do by keeping out of its way. Without equal, this was the predator of the Jurassic. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, show your opinion with a thumbs up and share it with others. Maybe subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Why not post a comment on what dinosaur you'd like me to do a profile on next? By the way, these are dinosaur profiles. No pterosaurs or marine reptiles need apply. Note, I will not be doing Tyrannosaurus Rex in my next profile. I will be doing it eventually, I just want more experience so I can do it justice. If you want to further support this channel, I have a book available on iBooks. It's interactive, has original illustrations, and has a number of interesting dinosaurs in it, including Allosaurus. Link in the description. My next video will be on a true Jurassic giant. Many sauropods grew big. This decided to go long. A dinosaur profile on Diplodocus. Hope to see you then.